And joining us today is Jack Posobiec, senior editor of Human Events, and according to your Twitter handle, Communism Disrespecter. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, yeah, thank you. I appreciate you adding that. I change my Twitter handle and the bio pretty frequently. Sometimes, kind of with like if there's something going on in current events, I'll add something like I was test ballots POSO recently to talk about the problems in the New York mayoral primary because they added all these test ballots, of course, that were seeping their way into the actual count. So I was test ballot POSO. There was something else POSO, My Pillow promo code POSO, and all the different things. So Communism Disrespecter, we're trying that one out because a lot of people were asking me. They say you're always talking about China. You're always talking about Antifa. You got this wife from the former Soviet Union, satellite republic. You're from Poland originally. Your family. So like, how do you tie it all together? And I say, I guess, well, it's all communism, right? So I'm a communism disrespecter.
But has real communism been tried?
No, never once, actually. As a matter of fact, it's the next one will be the real one.
Something to look forward to then.
Yes, we'll all be looking forward with our red hearts emblazoned as the sun shining above Tiananmen Square Gate.
That came a little too easily.
I know. I've been watching too many of the 100-year anniversary, so I've been drenched in CCP propaganda for the last week or so.
That stuff is so creepy. Like it really is cult-like. Like when they have the hammer and sickle in gold shining down on the people.
And it looks like everyone's worshiping the hammer and sickle flag. Yeah. It's pretty weird.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, the official position of any communist party, right, or any communist country is going to be that we are officially an atheist nation. But when you look at it, it's no, you've replaced your national religion with the religion of Marxist-Leninism, right? So this has become a new national religion that's taught in every school. It's taught from the highest levels of government all the way down so that, everything, yeah, sure, they allow some temples to be open and, some of the like official churches here and there. But when it really comes down to it, what you're looking at is essentially a state religion that's being pressed by the government, which, and it's so interesting because, I try to explain to people in the West that we don't have anything. They're like, well, they're a political party. No. They're not a political party. CCP is not like, it's not like the Republican Party, and then you have a committee man and you go to a meeting like once a week or something. No, it's not like that at all.
What I find interesting is that it's become so blatant in the lead up to the 100th anniversary stuff. Like Xi Jinping goes to these, holy sites, and that's the word they use for the history of the Communist Party in China. And then he talks about how going to these sites is like a process of spiritual awakening. It's really interesting that they can just use all this language. But in the West, we're kind of like, oh, like we just ignore it. Like we don't really see what they're talking about.
Well, it's in the West, right? We instead of we had been secular for so many years, and now in the West we're getting a new religion called wokeism, and that is really what's being preached and instituted. Though, of course, it's being fought against by like the actual like traditional Western values. But the fact that what Xi Jinping is doing, it's totally different. By the way, from the early communists, Mao was never like this. By blending, right, mysticism and a lot of traditional spiritual beliefs with the CCP, it's actually more dynastic, right? And if I had to compare it to anything, I'd compare it to the dynastic theory of the mandate of heaven that exists in China. And, it's almost like he's tacitly he's saying it without saying it, that the CCP is the new dynasty, and we have been given the mandate of heaven. We are prosperous, we are strong, and this is all because heaven favors us. So you see this as well in their response to COVID-19, where when it first came out, they said this virus is a demon from hell, right? And you certainly would never hear Hu Jintao or Jiang Zemin talking like that, using, these guys are technocrats. You wouldn't hear them using spiritual references or theological references. But with Xi Jinping, he's taking that all to another level. And then, of course, he always positions himself as the locus of all of that power and all of that energy. I mean, it really is like he's giving himself the mandate of heaven has been bestowed upon him.
One thing that's interesting about what you're saying about the mandate of heaven, these kinds of things, it almost seems like a result also of co-opting Chinese culture into it, because I think the party has for many decades now tried to basically co-opt Chinese culture and say, well, we are the legacy of 5,000 years of history, all this stuff, and use nationalism and kind of bring that into their type of socialism with Chinese characteristics. So but Chinese language and culture is full of things like Mandate of Heaven, or when Xi Jinping is at Tiananmen Square and he's wishing the Communist Party to long life. He uses wan sui, which is the term that you would say, live 10,000 years, which is what you used to say that to the emperor. So there's a lot of this blending of Chinese culture, of kind of the original communism, and Xi Jinping going back to a lot of the type of communism that you saw before reform and opening up, which was always there, but kind of less explicit for people looking at it from the West.
Well, there's also, and I would even say that it's almost like directly against some of the very early Marxist kind of programs that were pushed in the different campaigns, like the Four Olds campaign, for example, right? So this was something that was part of, prior to like the first United Front, even before the Japanese invasion. And then again, you see these forces kind of bubble up again during the Chinese Cultural Revolution, or excuse me, the Great Proletarian Revolution. And, it's this targeting of Chinese culture. So, doing away with traditional characters, stylizing Mandarin as really kind of being pushed across all the provinces, and then shutting down, basically the teaching of local dialects in schools, or the use of local dialects in broadcast television or radio. And then, this idea that we have to destroy history, that we have to sever history. History is a history of imperialism. And this is, of course, straight from Marx, right? This is Marx taking his I guess, as we would say in the Gramscian sense in the West, we would call it his critical lens, right? The critical view of historicity, and saying that history is a struggle between the imperialists and the proletariat. Now, what she is doing, right, and this is where the culture part falls in. Now they've actually reformulated the proposition, and so instead of history being the proletariat versus the imperialists and the ruling class, now history is the Chinese people versus the outside world. And that's the only thing that's ever been going on. And that, of course, is the theme that you hear again and again and again. And of course, this is where you get most infamously or famously, it's what the 100 years of humiliation, right? The century of humiliation, which they talk about, the Opium War to the founding of the People's Republic. Which I always find very interesting, because I always kind of point out, they say, well, World War II, where was the CCP? And you guys were out in Yan'an. You were on the Long March, right? You were out in the provinces. It was not the CCP fighting the Japanese by and large, or any of the major skirmishes, right? That was Kuomintang. That was Chiang Kai-shek, right? That was the nationalists. That was the Americans with the Flying Tigers, right? CCP was waiting and holding much of their strength in reserve so that after the war, they could then come back and take over. Keep in mind as well that the CCP, by and large, up until, I guess, the 1960s, was essentially a foreign-backed insurrectionist movement, right? This was a Soviet program under their Far East Bureau. You had Soviet agents at that founding of the CCP in Shanghai in the 1920s, in that sort of garden mansion that's still there in Xintiandi in the French concession. It gets broken up by French police later on. And so this, the way that they're looking at it is, oh no, we're the representatives of the Chinese people. No, you guys were backed by the Russians early on. You were foreign backed the same way that the Japanese were foreign backed. It was the nationalists that were actually the representatives of the people, founded by Sun Yat-sen. And you were the ones who used foreign power, foreign money, foreign influence, foreign material to grow and become stronger, and then were able to take over the country after the war, because you declared war on the, in the immediate aftermath of the United Front, the defeat of Japan. But of course, none of that gets taught, right? None of that gets questioned in the history books. It's all the CCP defeated Japan. They pushed them out. They defeated the imperialists, and now they are the ones making China strong again. Which you talk about Deng Xiaoping and reform and opening up. The financing for reform and open up, the financing for the beginning of China, or beginning of new China, I guess you could say, that's not coming from anywhere internal. That's FDI. That's foreign direct investment. So again, that's foreign countries who decided, or really, I would say foreign financiers who have decided that there's so much opportunity for growth in China that they are the ones who come in and start bankrolling so many of these new operations. And you get like quasi-privatization, you get these state-owned or state partnership JVEs, the joint ventures that are going on in China. So, it's very interesting that, of course, that the way they present things is completely divorced from what's actually going on under the hood.
Yeah, the reality is a group of Soviet-backed communist guerrilla forces seized control of West Taiwan. But yeah, but
right, exactly.
We're talking about
West Taiwan and Tibet and East Turkestan and
that's right,
Manchuria, Inner Mongolia,
all the places. I mean, it's interesting when you talked about the way that they talk about the World War II, because often in history books it'll be a very passive sentence that's like the Japanese were defeated in 1945.
It's technically not a lie.
That's technically not a lie. But it makes it seem like, well, we defeated the Japanese, but the Japanese were defeated.
They were defeated
by someone in 1945. But what you were just talking about, Jack, was very similar to what we started talking about, the religion thing, about how they essentially hollowed out religion in China and then replaced it with the Communist Party. And then they've kind of taken history, like the Chinese cultural history, and kind of taken that and twisted it to become, the history of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, that's a point I wanted to make. Like, we were talking about how, like, you made the point that, like, the Cultural Revolution, the campaign against the Four Olds, that seems like it's in conflict with what's happening right now. But the reality is, communist revolutions have always used whatever tactics they can to achieve whatever their aims may be at the time. And the reality is the campaign against the Four Olds is not in conflict with the current use of Chinese culture and history by Xi Jinping. It's very much tied together, because when you destroy the intellectuals, when you destroy people's understanding of history, then it can be whatever you want it to be. And you see Xi Jinping using it.
They can rewrite Genesis in their own Bible, right? So now it's essentially like all created by them, right? Like the modern
Did they rewrite
China.
Genesis?
Well, no, but I mean, like in their own sort of communist way of looking at things, right? Like they're rewriting the history of how the PRC was established, right? Like basically, as you pointed out, Jack, hiding all the things that they, all the battles they intentionally missed in World War II, so that the Kuomintang could get, their soldiers and leadership killed.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine living in a country that is dramatically rewriting its own history.